That's quite a journey from
Yeah.
so many different industries, but it's amazing you achieved your goal to be in data, and I'm sure you'll keep achieving to go towards data science even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
but yeah, no, something you mentioned definitely rings very true. I think almost every company is talking about digital transformation and including big data or machine learning or AI in some ways in that transformation.
Yeah.
So that's actually why I want to start first with the big common question. So when we're talking about data science, Samir, what is
Yeah.
the hype and what is the reality from your perspective?
Well, there's a lot of hype. I think a lot of companies that profess to do big data or analytics are still at a very immature stage, but then talk a lot about it. Definitely. The reality is that you only really see advanced data solutions, and I don't really like to call it big data because you can still do advanced data solutions with small amounts of data and small
Mm-hmm.
pools of data. I just call it advanced solutions, and let's just call them smaller solutions or more vanilla solutions. And you actually see that even though companies are going through this process of digital transformation, a lot of them are not even touching the surface of what they can actually do. And I'm not only talking about companies like you know. Like a startup, a small startup, but there are also companies like Coca-Cola, or even in some cases companies like Budweiser, Heineken, all these big companies that you think would be on point with their digital game are still kind of far behind. And so the big reason for that is a lack of talent. There's a big lack of talent right now in digital. Things are moving very fast, and people can't find the right skill sets to be able to match with what they need.
Mm-hmm.
A lack of understanding. The people who are actually managing these companies are just hearing a lot of catchphrases, right?
Mm.
And so they think, oh, I got to digitally transform, I got to do this, I got to do that. And so they pay a bunch
Right.
of people to come to the company, and then they don't have any idea of what to make them do.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it was really funny because I see all these job descriptions and it says like, oh, the person needs to have an understanding of Python, R, SQL, Ruby, JavaScript, C++,
Yep.
and every single language that is related to anything about coding. And that's where you kind of get the hint that, okay, these people really don't know what they're talking about sometimes, right? You know? And so a lot of the reason of the hype comes from management, where they just want change for
Yep.
the sake of it. Whereas the reality is that, you have to take a lot of steps backwards. When I came into a company in China that I was working for, when I first came to China, I realized that it wasn't only a problem of implementing advanced analytic solutions. It was actually a problem of actually gathering the data, which is an
Mm.
easy task if you think about it. But data gathering is the first step to anything
Right.
in analytics, right? And most companies are even bad at that. So if they don't have that fundamental foundation of a data culture, they will not, be able to actually implement any of those solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the reality is that when you come in as an advanced data analytics manager, or whatever you want to call it, you are actually setting the groundwork most of the time. You're
Mm-hmm.
actually realizing that, okay, digital transformation is not something sexy like, oh, we need to move towards predictive algorithms and optimization. It's actually something as mundane as just getting the data, having these people use it every day, reporting that,
Right.
implementing a software instead of having people send Excels and pieces of paper and voice chats on WeChat to each other, about what the current sales are,
Yep.
getting your KPIs in order, getting your structure in order. That's the reality. And I think the credit needs to be the unspoken heroes of data science today are the ones that are actually patiently collecting every bit of data,
Mm-hmm.
constantly monitoring that data is clean, that it's structured, And the false heroes are actually the ones that are doing those machine learning algorithms and thinking, oh, I'm such a superstar. That's kind of the reality. It's all about data collection, and that is where, sorry, my and that is where the true excitement for me lies: data collection. Because if you can actually build a good
Right.
infrastructure in collecting, cleaning, organizing, and actually using the data, then you actually have the full value chain. Whereas a lot of
Hmm.
people, they think about the hype and they think, oh, machine learning algorithms, oh, Python libraries, oh, sexy visualization softwares. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg most of the times.
Yep. No, that's a really, really good point. I think indeed, so much of the hype right now is going around pretty much this fear of missing out. You hear a new
Yeah.
buzzword, you want to implement it in your company. Tomorrow there's a new buzzword, you need to implement it again. And indeed, I think also a very common misconception is both on an individual level and company level, this understanding that if you want to have good output working with data, you first need to have good input. So exactly what you were describing, being good at gathering data, being structured in how everyone is reporting. It's definitely a very interesting point. Um,
Yeah.
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 So actually,
I
Samir,
learned that.
oh,
I
sorry,
learned that
please go
at a
ahead.
very, yeah, I learned that at a very young age, actually, that your algorithm or your output in terms of what you're building is only as good as your input, and
Exactly.
it's not. I mean, China is very fortunate to have such good data environments. I mean, you can scrape data from many sources. You can get you have a lot of clean, structured access to data here through
Yep.
various platforms. But in the end, you really need to learn the principles of data cleaning and structuring and organizing in order to have good business value for whatever it is you're going to do next.
Yeah. No, that's totally right. Cool. And Samir, can you talk to me a little bit more about the typical data roles? So, the three that we often hear about is there's the data scientist, the data analyst, and the data engineer. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about these three and how do they work together and what's the difference between them?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably more roles. There's a big role for data security people. There's a big role for system administrator and all these things. But I mean, let's just start with the beginning, right?
Hmm.
Data sourcing, making sure that all of the information is organized and can be deployed well, and actually building the algorithms to be able to source and clean up the data.
Hmm.
I would put a lot of the times at the data engineer level.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
so constructing the right APIs to be able to get the information from one place to the other.
Right.
Making sure that the data that you're coming is uninterrupted, meaning that you're getting it at all times. Say, for example, some of the information is coming weekly and some of the information is coming daily.
Hmm.
Structuring it so that all of that information is homogenized and able to basically be linked up via the databases. Speaking of
Hmm.
databases, also making sure that the SQL servers are aligned and accessible to the
Hmm.
people who downstream.
Right.
Then you move, like I said, downstream, where the data scientists are the ones that are kind of what is famously termed ETL,
Hmm.
extract, transform, ETL in the sense of actually getting it into the business sense, right? More into the business sense. So
Mm.
the data
Right.
scientist would be the one in charge of actually getting that data. Once the API is constructed, it's loaded into an SQL server,
Hmm.
and actually building something with it. They could use whatever they want. They could use Alteryx, they could use Python, they could use R. I mean, it doesn't really matter. They could even use Excel.
Hmm.
Uh, but at the end of the day, the data scientist is in charge of actually making sure that the vast sum of data is starting to actually begin to be simplified to be able to go downstream so
Mm-hmm.
that anybody looking at something would be able to decipher it in a more
Mm-hmm.
intelligible way. I think that in a nutshell explains the data scientist role. I don't want to go too much into it because there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
to explain. But then the data analyst, I mean, I don't really like to call data analyst a role. I think data scientist and good data scientist should also be an analyst as well in
Interesting.
many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the data analyst that you speak of is more the person that actually gets into the deliverable
Mm-hmm.
phase of being with the client, being able to translate that client's needs into business proposition,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to actually put it out into a visualization dashboard, whether it is a scenario analysis, forecasting, predictive analysis, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
implementing it into their own company structure, whatever it may be. The data analyst is also in charge of user acceptance testing. So
Mm-hmm.
if the client is not happy with something, or if the client is seeing something really wrong with their data, which is, trust me, is more often than not, that person has to go upstream all over again and try to actually find the root cause of it. So the data analyst might actually be a more project based and project related person,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
in reality, the data scientist and data analyst do have a lot of overlap, as does the
Right.
data engineer sometimes. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
startups, what you're going to find is that the data engineer gets the information, deploys it, containerizes it, and makes sure that it's easily digestible
Yep.
for a data scientist. But in the end, there's a lot of overlap as well. The data engineer can
For
also
sure.
go down once they've retrieved the data and start to do some simple analysis. I
Yep.
think it's very important to mention that testing should be happening at all steps. You
Right.
know, it's not just the job of the project, the data analyst, as I said.
Mm-hmm.
There should be firstly data integrity testing from the data engineer who's actually
Mm-hmm.
sourcing the information and extracting it and transforming it in their own way.
Right.
Then from the data scientist perspective, there should be, make sure that all sources are correct.
Mm-hmm.
One common problem for a data scientist is that, some information might only be coming in monthly, but some
Right.
information might be coming in daily. So how do
Right.
you homogenize that? And how do you make sure that you're comparing apples with apples rather
Mm-hmm.
than,
Mm-hmm.
having time series that don't speak to each other?
Yep.
So that sort of testing is really necessary. And then from the data analyst perspective, you also have, user acceptance testing, what they
Yes.
would call it. Yeah.
Interesting. So actually, Samir, from what you just mentioned, a curious question. So do you see anything like data analyst role being essentially merged into a data scientist role, and then we have data engineers and data scientists? I mean, out of these three, of course, excluding the other roles. Is that something you're noticing, or?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a good data scientist should be a good data analyst as well, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean that they should always be client facing. I mean, I really discourage data scientists to be too client facing because, as we always know from working with the client has a million requests, and a data scientist can easily just get drowned out by all those requests
Mm-hmm.
and they just keep getting distracted. The
Mm-hmm.
client will say, "Build me this, build me that, build me this." It's the data analyst's job to see what is feasible, what is translatable
Mm-hmm.
from our data source to our fundamental data pool to a business perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and to test it to see if it's actually making business sense. But at the end of the day, what you actually find in practice is that data analysts usually come from like a business background or like project management or a marketing background. They're not
Hmm.
very heavy coders, but
Right.
if you're enthusiastic and you actually want to learn about it, you move from downstream to upstream.
Right.
As do a lot of data scientists move from upstream to downstream. I myself am more of the business side person.
Hmm.
I actually started doing a bunch of business and solving business problems. Like I said,
Hmm.
I've graduated in business, but then I've slowly actually moved upstream more into the coding aspect,
Yeah.
more into the actually building visualization dashboards and things like that by
Hmm.
myself, rather than having to depend on a data scientist to do it sometimes. And
Right.
I'm not at the phase of being a data engineer, nor do I know if I want to go that far upstream.
Hmm.
But it is often over. There's a lot of overlap as well, because I also have to be able to talk to data engineers and be able to understand their work and work with them constantly to make sure that they are fulfilling and executing their work well.
Certainly. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah, indeed. I think basically data engineer is someone who's indeed working upstream, creating those pipelines. And from what you're describing, then I understand data scientist is really more internal, and data analyst is a little bit more on the forefronts, like user testing and a little bit more client facing sometimes. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if I find somebody really a data scientist really excited
Hmm.
about doing a bunch of analysis once that data is clean
Hmm.
and ready to go,
Hmm.
and they love to do all these graphs and stuff like that, I like to put them in a data analyst position,
Right.
because I'm like, yeah, you're really going to enjoy this. But if I find somebody who is more, liking to, they like to actually test out the libraries that there are in Python, test out all the different types of algorithms that they could check, or that they could do, test out the integrity of the information in terms of error and the error of the model and things like that. Then of
Hmm.
course they're a born data scientist. If
Makes
they
sense.
like running a matching algorithm, or being able to clean up data until it's perfect,
Yeah.
100% perfection, then they're more of a data scientist.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of fluidity between them, between them both, but they
Hmm.
do come with their certain skill sets.
For sure.
Yeah, it's not that. I mean, there's no underestimating the role of a data analyst just because they don't code as much. And of course, the data. One thing that I'm going to segue into right now, maybe it's not
Hmm.
one of your questions, but I
That's
have
fine.
thought about talking about that, is that
Hmm.
nowadays in data science, you also have a lot of softwares that are no code softwares.
Yep.
And that's
Absolutely.
becoming the big thing.
Hmm.
Now, no coding software is definitely the way that things are heading, because you have all these big companies now that don't have necessarily the coding talent, but they do have analysis talent.
Yep.
So if you look at companies like BCG, McKinsey, even Accenture, they use these out of the box softwares like Alteryx, RapidMiner. They use a Power BI, Tableau, which
Yep.
involve very little knowledge of coding, more knowledge of statistics,
Hmm.
and most knowledge of analysis.
Yep.
And the value add with those is basically to be able to analyze quickly and use the standard techniques. I'm going to highlight standard
Hmm.
techniques of data science to be able to actually come up with solutions for that you normally see. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's not to say that they're going to take over Python and R and all these other softwares anytime soon. Once again, I said that those are used for standard analysis.
Yep.
No code is actually becoming very big now. Goldman Sachs just invested something like $100 million in a company last week, because they feel that no code is the future for most companies that lack the talent.
Right.
But if you're actually somebody who can get their hands dirty on non-standard data science techniques and have the creativity, then you have that complete package to be able to be a good data analyst and be able to manipulate various sets of data the way you like it,
Yeah.
without facing those rigid boundaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I think definitely there's a lot of these very interesting platforms, and I've tried some of those you mentioned, like RapidMiner and Tableau. I think
Yeah.
another very interesting thing about them is that they actually benefit in many ways the data scientists and data engineers as well. Because as you mentioned, I mean, for data
Yeah.
engineer and data scientists, a lot of things that we do is clean up data, make sure that the pipelines are continuous. And from what I've seen, this software gets rid of some of that repetitive work that a data scientist or data engineer would need to do with every project, and lets them focus really on as you said, on these non-standard things, these more creative and um, more kind of complex and more exciting tasks.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. That's definitely the way data science is heading. There's going to be, I mean, we always talk about data science as being technical heavy. I mean, I think it's a very comprehensive field right now. And
Mm-hmm.
if I were to bet which way it's going to go in the future, I would go more towards the analysis and creativity side, than the technical side, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always going to be space for the technical side, and the people who are going to be most innovative are going to be the ones that have everything in terms of the skill sets. But I do see that, in terms of what's happening right now, even if you see the Python libraries right now, they're being made to make our lives more simple,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of these analysts have realized that, a lot of the stuff that's being done right now in the field of data scientist is very repetitive.
Yeah,
So you need these libraries that create frameworks that can basically help you to just put input in and then get out. One of my friends was
absolutely.
joking the other day that, it used to take 6 months to be able to do a machine learning algorithm. Now it takes just a library download and scikit-learn, and you can pretty much get started. Over
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So actually, Samir, that kind of brings me to another question. So from time to time, when we mention the role of a data scientist to people, the reaction we get is, oh, data scientist, that sounds like someone who belongs in a laboratory or in the basement of an office. So I'm curious, what's your comment on that? Like in nowadays, what's the place in an organization of not just a data scientist, but a data team in general?
Yeah, I think it's important. And when I studied science in university, one of my professors hammered it in pretty well into me that science is not a profession, science is a methodology. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's the methodology of coming up with a hypothesis, breaking down that hypothesis, synthesizing it, and then testing it to be able to come to conclusions. Okay?
Right.
So
Well said.
when you think of scientists, I mean, at the end of the day, a psychologist sitting in an office talking to a client is a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
because they're having a hypothesis with how to diagnose that client, uh, um, and then actually coming up with solutions,
Mm-hmm.
given their hypothesis or not. So science, you have to look at it methodologically and not, from what environment they're operating in over here. The methodology of a scientist is always the same, and data science is basically the application of scientific methodology into numerical trends
Mm-hmm.
and data,
Mm-hmm.
and not the medical field or the field of the chemistry, or these other things that we associate science with more
Mm-hmm.
often than not.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah, I think also another trend we're noticing is in general, data team is becoming more and more, well, essentially closer to the business, closer to the frontline functions, closer to the commercial functions. And I think as you mentioned as well, some industries which in the past used to either not think about data at all or outsource it to an agency or third party are now starting to build up quite sophisticated data teams inside with a lot of different roles and people who are the kind of connectors between the business side and the data side. Is that something you're noticing as well? Like what are corporates doing in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think corporates are really behind in the game, actually,
Mm-hmm.
looking at how things are moving. I mean, I dare to say that 8 out of 10 corporates that you go to right now are still using Excel, PowerPoint, and pieces of paper,
Yep.
especially in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the only companies that are really leveraging data science at the moment, and why it's so scary right now, are the tech companies. Why? Because they've actually had visibility up
Mm-hmm.
until now into what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing, sales functions, companies that are in e-commerce are the ones that are leveraging data science because they already have
Mm-hmm.
the pools of data, right?
Yep.
And it goes back to my entire spiel about collecting data as being the core of your data science strategy.
Yeah.
Most of these companies, be it manufacturing companies, be it food companies, retail companies, have not been collecting their data properly. And if they have, it's
Mm-hmm.
been in a non-uniform way. It's
Mm-hmm.
not been cross-departmentalized, meaning that each department is not speaking to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and it hasn't been operationalized,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
meaning that people are not actually using that data in their day-to-day operations.
Right.
What it's being used for is basically some obscure ERP or some obscure CRM, which one department maybe sees,
I
and
see.
they use only a minimal amount of data that is actually gathered, and the
Mm-hmm.
rest of it goes to junk. Or it might actually be used in some PowerPoint that the manager sees and then just files in his hard disk for eternity,
Yes.
only to never be made into action with.
Yeah.
So, at the corporate level, it's very scary how little data there is right
Mm-hmm.
now. And that's the whole thing about digital transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Digital
Mm-hmm.
transformation is not just about implementing a bunch of cool softwares, it's also about process. So you actually have to come, when you're, a lot of digital transformation managers I know are coming from non-technical roles, is
Mm-hmm.
because they recognize that even though they don't have coding skills, or they don't have the requisite technical skill sets, they know what the importance is of setting up the processes so that people are using data, people are
Yeah.
recording the data, and people are storing the data in the right way.
Yeah.
The software, the gathering, sorry, the analysis part comes after that. Like which softwares you're getting. At
Mm-hmm.
the more tech startup, the more attractive tech startups to everyone, like the Googles, the Facebooks, and everything. Of course, data is being used optimally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think these companies are the ones that really have been leveraging the data science trend forward,
Mm-hmm.
because they've been able to show how the more real time you are to your data, to collecting your data, the more in tune you are with your customers. And the more
Right.
in tune you are with your customers, the more actions you can take.
Yeah.
But take, for example, a manufacturing company
Mm-hmm.
that has 1,000 distributors in one city. Most of those distributors are located in second or third tier cities.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth are you going to actually implement a digital transformation across your value chain, from procurement of raw materials to selling to the end customer in real time, without having a multi-billion-dollar budget,
Yeah.
and having the consent of third parties as well? So that's
Yeah.
why digital transformation in other industries becomes so difficult to implement, because you really cannot control some things sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're a Google or a Facebook, yeah, you've got your value chain covered.
Mm-hmm.
Your company is literally inside of all your data's company is literally inside of your own server spaces. Okay.
Right. That's a good point.
And so these big companies are able to actually leverage that data from the beginning of their value chain to the end. But the challenge now is going to be how companies actually rethink themselves, work
Mm-hmm.
backwards, and start to say, hey guys, we are no longer just manufacturing companies, we are tech companies. And that
Right.
tech aspect needs to actually manifest itself in our actions. So
Right.
no more of this salesperson going to 100 stores and taking down a piece of paper saying, okay, I got this for this guy, this for this guy, this for this guy. I need to actually implement some kind of hardware.
Mm-hmm.
That hardware needs to be backed up by a software. That software needs to actually be backed up by a competent team of individuals who can firstly implement that software and then actually deploy it and analyze that information for actionable insights.
Right,
And then
right.
the baby boomers can take over and actually start to use that information for their own decisions, you know.
Yeah, that's very interesting indeed, like rethinking your business as a tech business. Actually, Samir, I'm curious, from your work with data, what kind of industries, I mean, tech industry, obviously, as you said, they are built on the backbone of tech and collecting data and having very strong systems on the tech side. Although even then, actually, some tech companies, when you have a look inside, you can be
They're not,
surprised.
yeah,
Yeah, you can be surprised on what's really happening. But
exactly.
apart from the tech world, what kind of industries or even what kind of interesting cases, like successful cases, have you seen of companies working well with data? Obviously, you don't need to mention company names, but what have you seen companies doing that actually worked?
Well, I think one of the things that I've actually seen a lot of is how powerful. I mean, you might love it or you hate it, but the finance industry is really able to leverage data to maximize their profits. You know,
Right.
they are really at the forefront of being able to use data to be able to maximize their profits. I mean, fintech obviously receives a lot of investments. You
Right.
have companies literally creating something as minute as dashboards for hedge funds specialized in the drinks sector.
Mm,
You have some stuff like that. So these finance companies are extremely capable. They have the budget, and they're actually starting to mimic the tech companies in the sense that they're actually starting to go electronic across their value chain right now.
yes.
And so I think that after tech, the finance industry has done the best job of actually digitally transforming themselves. You know, I think it's extremely praiseworthy, despite the fact that there might be so much corruption or or greed in the financial corporate sector. The way they've actually been able to move to e-currencies,
Hmm.
the way they've actually been able to move to e-trading, algorithmic trading, very
Right.
quickly, and the way they've actually been able to leverage data that is from all over the world into their businesses to be able to make timely decisions on investments
Yeah.
over here. So, I mean, people are always saying that, traders are going to be replaced by machines in no time and stuff like that. I'm yet to see that, but I honestly think that the way the pace at which the finance industry has moved after tech
Yeah.
has actually been quite amazing. Of course, they have the money to recruit the best talent, right? So that's a big
Supposedly,
factor.
yeah.
They make mountains move with the amount of cash that they have.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to digital transformation, most of these companies like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan are already acting and working like tech companies.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where you're seeing 1,000 people on the floor doing transactions, on a stock market floor. And gone are the days when you're seeing literally people having to wait 20 days to be able to get a report on a company.
Yes.
All these analytics are being used real time to be able to make powerful business decisions.
Yes.
In the finance industry.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think
and
I
I
think
mean,
we're starting to see also the results of that now, because if you just look at the last few months, you could see how many acquisitions there's been by banks acquiring fintech startups, indeed, to
yeah,
help them connect closer to the user, put their finance management in an app. I mean, there was Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Citi. I think in recent months, all bought at least one fintech startup that helped them with these dashboards, connecting with the user, APIs. So yeah, I
yeah.
think we're starting to see the results now of these fintech companies really leveraging data.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Very good
Samir,
point.
sorry, I just want to remind everyone who's listening, feel free to post your questions in the group chat in Zoom, or also WeChat is fine if you prefer. We're gonna move soon to some questions from you guys. But Samir, going back to the data scientist role, as you mentioned, now we at LevelGone are happy to launch a data science bootcamp. And I wanted to ask you from, the journey that you've made, have you noticed, are there any attributes that make a good data scientist? Why I'm asking is because I'm curious, can anyone become a data scientist or a data expert? Or is there some prerequisites that you think are necessary?
Yeah, I think I get that a lot. I think one thing is what I want people to do in the next 1 minute or 30 seconds is write down on the chat, what did they think the most important skill set of a data scientist, that one skill set of a data scientist should be.
That's a good
And
one.
let's just see what they say in the chat. Okay, starting from 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second, write it down in what the most important quality of a data scientist should be.
Nice. That's a
Okay.
good one. All right, chat, let's go. What's the top skill you think a data scientist should have? All right. We have detail-oriented, critical thinking, know what data to use, understand business. That's a very interesting one. Understand data. So we have a bit of both sides here. There's some pandas libraries, I see.
Yeah,
All right.
technical skills. Yeah, that's
Technical
to come.
important.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. You guys got 15 seconds more. Please, guys, just keep them going.
Oh, creativity. Very interesting. Nice.
Yeah. All right.
All right, Samir.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, great. Okay, so we got good with math, logical reasoning. The regulars, creativity is a good one. Connecting dots, analyze data, good statistical knowledge, understanding business, know what data should use, understanding the data. I think understanding data it goes without saying. But in my experience, the one that's not here, and I think is the most important right now, especially at this day and age, is that the data scientist should have integrity. They must be an honest
Very
person.
interesting.
They must be very worthy of. They must be holding on to their word and make sure that their word is never a lie. So, and why is that? We live in an age right now where our bosses know less than we do in terms of what's being analyzed, in terms of what software is being used, in terms of how to use that software.
Right.
If data scientists want to actually do their job and want to do it well, they need to make sure that they are regulating themselves integrally and actually doing the right job of analyzing the data with honesty and not telling a lie to themselves just to be able to get some extra points with the boss.
Right.
All right, because that usually happens. All right, I've seen some people tell me, oh, this is going to take 3 days, when I know for a fact it's going to take 3 hours at most, just because they think that I don't know what their skill sets encompass.
Yeah.
So in today's world, the data scientist, the most fundamental attribute for a data scientist, regardless of being able to understand math, being able to code, being able to actually be good with numbers or be creative, is actually being able to be honest with themselves. Because you can actually fall into a very dark path as a data scientist to convince yourself that what you're doing is correct and that your methodology is correct and that you are going to do this, or it might be 2 in the morning and you have to submit tomorrow, and you just build something on your black box machine learning algorithm without being and put it in a visualization dashboard without actually explaining it what it actually is to anybody else, and because you need that promotion or because you want something else. That's the worst data scientist in the world. And let me tell you something, there's more than you might think of those people. All right?
All right.
I'm definitely thinking that today's data scientists, the ones that I recruit the most and the ones that I would most likely fire, are the ones that are the ones that I'd recruit the most are the ones that are integral and honest.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that are most likely to fire is the day that I catch them lying or to being
Wow.
dishonest to me. All
Right.
right. So if you really want to rise in your career as a data scientist, make sure you're always going to be honest and be thorough with investigating your data,
Yes.
regardless of your methodology. The software, the being good with numbers, there's facilitators for that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's going to be more and more. But nothing will ever substitute honesty and integrity in the field of data and rigorous analysis to make sure that that the people that you're serving are not betrayed. Because a data scientist, no matter what you might think, is actually in charge of people's livelihoods. They might not be like an engineer
Absolutely.
or a scientist who's in charge of people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in charge of people's livelihoods. Imagine if my analysis told me that 20% of the workforce needs to get fired because we need to cut costs, when in reality that number was only 2%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know how much that would actually affect the market? So integrity is the most important skill a data scientist today can have.
Mm-hmm.
And it might sound very cheesy or romantic to say so, but believe me, it'll only make you stronger once people realize that you don't bullshit, that
Right.
you don't screw around in your methodology.
Yeah.
The best data scientists that I've seen, I think I can talk about him because he might be on the chat. One of my friends, Bruno, is he's an expert in what he does, and he's risen to new levels. He's written many articles, is because his methodology is so rigorous that he actually takes pride in how he analyzes and tests and actually revises every piece of code that he's written.
Right.
Okay. And right now, I mean, you can check him out on LinkedIn. He's written so many articles right now under the name of Jongtron, but he has really, he really has perfected dashboarding and visualization softwares to an art, because he's been able to actually rigorously and methodically perfect his game.
Nice.
And that sort of stuff gets you recognized in the data science field. Not
Right.
just saying, hey guys, I did this analysis about basketball statistics, or hey guys, I did this analysis about e-commerce in China.
Yeah.
No, the best data scientists are able to actually show their methodology and be able to replicate it and say, hey guys, this is what I did, and actually be able to explain it to everybody in a fashion where everybody understands it.
Yes.
Integrity. That's what I mean. That's all it comes down to, is integrity. Because I know data scientists, Pavel, who will tell you, oh yeah, I did this, but oh yeah, I can't show you how. You're not. It's a waste of time.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
That black box thinking is bad for the industry. It's bad for the company, and it's bad for people.
Right. That's super insightful, Samir. Thank you for sharing. And shout outs to Bruno then. We'll definitely make sure to share the link Samir mentioned in the chat later. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And especially, what you said, now we're starting to get used to relying more and more on data to give us answers. And of course, integrous data scientists behind that will essentially become a must, as we rely more on recommendation engines, on fitness apps telling us whether we're healthy or not. It's very, very interesting insight.
And I mean, right now you look at it in the professional world, especially for people looking to get into non-tech related industries like manufacturing or retail or e-commerce. Right now there's a huge talent gap, where the people on top actually are those baby boomers who have not, I mean, it's not their fault. They haven't studied tech. They have they perhaps have families. They have no time to study software and all the stuff that's coming out these days. And at the lower level right now, at the technical level, is these data scientists and data engineers. I'm not going to say we, but people at the data level, at the lower level, or the younger people, have a duty to be able to insightfully inform those people at the top level so that they can make the right decisions. That gap right now is closing very fast. But until the day that the technical people get to that managerial level, you're still going to see a lot of lies, a lot of the imposterhood in the data science field right now. And of course, it all comes down to being integral and being able to show your methodology and being able to actually take pride in what you do as a data scientist. There's a lot. I mean, I'm telling this to everybody as a warning as well as to research it. There's a
Yeah,
lot of black box softwares right now. All right.
absolutely.
There's a lot of softwares where I can just input and get the output.
Yeah,
But don't rely on those too much. Always question why and whether the methodology is actually working for what you're doing.
yeah.
You know?
No, that's a very good point. I think now there's even a new term being used, explainable AI,
Yeah.
to exactly encourage data scientists and people working with data to build systems that can be documented and can be explained, whether to management or to users. So yeah, definitely a trend that, as you said, hopefully the gap is gonna be closed.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, as the talent pool gets larger, the gap should be closed. You know, but I think the trend is moving forward to you know, these cookie cutter models of software.
Hmm.
But I think everybody needs to have a duty to learn to code and learn statistics and learn business so that they can actually become good data scientists that can actually test methodology on their own. You
Mm.
know.
That actually, you know, since you just mentioned that, I wanted to, you mentioned already a little bit about your answer, but still wanted to dive just a little bit more into that. For people who are not planning to be data engineers or data scientists or even data analysts, you know, for people who
Yeah.
are not planning to go to that path, is learning skills to work with data still valuable? Does it still, is it still useful for people who are not planning to take that path for future?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying that learning of all types is enriching and will get you far, right? But I would say that for people who are not planning on going down that path, even if you aren't, your industries are going to be affected by it, you
Hmm.
know? So doing something as even um, infinitesimal as understanding what a client segmentation looks like, or understanding what geospatial data is, you know,
Hmm.
those technical terms, uh, could get you far, you know,
Hmm.
because you're going to be working with a lot of people who are using data and have data to express their viewpoints.
Yeah.
If you can't question their methodology, then you're going to be subversive to them.
Hmm.
I've always said this, that at the end of the day, technology is just process.
Hmm.
And process is basically what human beings use to govern one another. Okay?
Right.
So people who control the process can control you. All
Hmm.
right? And you don't want to be in that situation where you're being controlled, or at least not understanding of the process,
Yes.
so that you cannot govern your way around it.
Yeah.
Not mean that you must dominate the process, or create your own process. That's anarchy. But you need to be able to understand the process in
Yeah.
order to be able to govern yourself around it. Data and data science is a process.
Yes.
Okay, this process is going to be used more and more to be able to govern the diktats of business.
Hmm.
And that is, of course, a fact of life. You know, otherwise you're going to have a bunch of people saying their opinions, and that's, once again, that's anarchy. Um, so if you are not knowledgeable or cognizant about this process,
Hmm.
then you're going to fall by the wayside by people who are going to try and control you through that process
Hmm.
and tell you, oh, I have the data, you don't. You know, that typical excuse.
Hmm.
So as as somebody who wishes to grow or at least stay significant, you need to be able to understand the process.
Yes. No, absolutely. I think what you're describing is exactly that. Even if you're not going to be in that path, many industries are getting disrupted either by others or are thinking about working on disrupting themselves by innovating, by going through
Yeah,
digital transformation. And very likely that this transformation is going to involve some level of tech and some level of data. So definitely speaking the language, being able to understand the people, understand what you're looking at and what to make of it will probably grow in importance over time. Um,
definitely.
yeah, fantastic, Samir. Thank you so much for all this sharing. We don't have much time left, so let me open up to the chat. So chat, please send us over some questions. We will try to pick a few and answer them and have Samir answer them as well. Let's see, is there any questions we have already? I see a question from Momo Xie. Is there any chance in the future people could be data analyst freelance? So if I understand this question correctly, is freelancing becoming a thing for people working with data? And is that a trend for the future?
Yeah, definitely. I would say actually that there's two ways it can go. Companies can start becoming more jealous, and as data security becomes an issue, there's going to be less and less freelancing in the data analysis industry. Or you could actually find companies that are willing to operate in a more modular fashion. Now, there's these two types of companies that exist already. Companies that will no way freelance anything because they don't want anything to get out of their ecosystem. Or there's companies that are so nimble and agile that they are looking to basically work fast and break things. And if it involves, breaching some data security concerns or risking some data security concerns, they will freelance to you. The problem with data, though, is that data is power. So, and often that data is not your own. If you're in a project, it can be the client's data. So how can you think of having a freelancer work on your client's data? I mean,
Right.
I've been in companies where the company did not even give its own laptops. They were basically telling you to bring laptops from home and work on them. How can you guarantee security for a client when this person can literally download the files, keep them in their laptop, and in the next day be able to sell them on Taobao,
Yes.
for a client? So data security is going to become very important, and it might actually hinder the freelancing world in the medium term in data science, particularly. Not necessarily product development. I think that's another ball game altogether. But in terms of a say for freelancing, I think there's a lot of companies that are seeing the benefits of operating in a project fashion, and actually starting to be able to operate in a way where they're agile, but at the same, I don't want to say agile as in the project management methodology. I mean more nimble,
Right.
because yeah, I don't mean agile for those of you who are project managers in the methodological sense, but for those who are nimble enough to be able to iterate and be able to use freelancers and have a more gig economy sort of setup with people that they trust. Trust is the main thing. We go back to the same circular argument. Trust and integrity are the most important things in data science these days.
Yeah.
Because if you have people that you trust, you're going to be able to outsource more work to them or work with them more often and trust them that they won't breach the data protocols.
Right.
Whereas if you don't have integral people, you're more hesitant, or an integral industry, you're hesitant to freelance to them. So I think there's two ways you can think about it right now. Some companies or the nature of some industries does not allow freelancing with data, but some of them might actually be more welcoming to it.
Makes sense.
From my standpoint, where in my job, I do not freelance data unless I have very good controls about in place.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I don't like to do it, honestly. But thanks for the question, Momo.
Got it. Nice. I see a few people already ask a question about where does one start? So if someone wants to get on this path, where does one person get started? How long can it take? Any resources, any tips?
Well, I mean, how long can it take? You can't ask me that question because I'm still on that journey. I'm still, I wouldn't even say I'm 40% or 30% proficient in data science, to be honest. I still feel when people talk that I'm lost out at sea.
I mean, we're always learning. That's good.
Exactly. We're always learning, and this industry is moving so fast.
Exactly. There's new things every day.
What I would encourage everyone to do, and this is my personal thing is start from what you're not going to do first rather than what you're going to do first. And what you're not going to do first is just Google machine learning expert in 20 days, or just try to get to the top as quickly as possible. I started off from a very simple basis. I started off as a management consultant who was basically using Excel all day, and saw that with the data that I had, something needed to be done to make this process more efficient. So I started researching which softwares could actually be able to get it. And what that's given me right now, till today, is the ability to understand data from like the back of my hand. Nobody has to explain to me what the data is or how it can be used. And that's a very important skill set for a data scientist, what the data is from the moment you see it and how it can be used optimally. All right. And no amount of online courses in machine learning or things like that are going to teach you that in a very in-depth manner as actually diving into data by yourself. So right. I would say that play around with data by yourself, even if it means doing simple database linkages in Power BI or using Microsoft Access, or even just taking two databases and doing some simple functions of adding and subtracting or blending them together using something as simple as Microsoft Access or Excel, even through VLOOKUPs. It's an ongoing process. I definitely think that the standard applications, Python, SQL, and a visualization software, if like Tableau or Power BI, are the three things that you need. One for storing data, SQL respectively, one for manipulating data, Python respectively, and one for analyzing and seeing that data, which is Tableau or Power BI respectively. If you actually learn those three softwares really well, and also maybe Excel to be able to actually, like I said, understand how to play with data. If you learn those four very well, you could honestly call yourself an 80% data scientist without any BS in any interview right now.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I definitely couldn't agree more. I think not just myself personally, but Lawagon in general, our philosophy is the same, that hands-on and just trying things, breaking things, fixing things is really the way to go when you're learning tech or learning something like data science. And that's also why we're actually starting with exactly those things in our program, as you mentioned, Python, SQL, and data visualization.
Yeah, as I go on, even after Lowagon, I operate with the principle of GF, which is Google plus a friend. If you have Google, after you've learned those basics, then you have Google. Yes. And then if you don't have Google, you can just write to your friend and tell him, hey, how do I do this? My friend is actually, believe it or not, he's Bruno. He's the guy who I ask, who's the data science guy, who I really ask for any question or any help that I'm having with the model. And he's able to actually explain the methodology to me. So my GF is basically, I Google it, and then if I don't understand what Google's telling me, there's a friend. Because I think the two fields we're lucky enough where the data, the access to data is most abundant is mathematics and technology. And fortunately, data science is just a blend of the two. Yeah. So Google will help you find everything in terms of mathematical methodologies as well as technological methodologies. Yeah. So with those two, you just research those two in Google and you got it. Then if you don't know how to combine those two, you can ask a friend. Yeah. And you got it, more or less.
For sure. No, so definitely.
Find a friend who's good at data scientist.
Definitely. No, I do agree. Definitely knowing how to search online for answers is absolutely invaluable skill of a programmer, data scientist, anyone working with.
And then, Pavel, it's knowing how to explain the problem to your friend. That's also the most important. Because he can just hang up the phone on you and be like, I don't know what you're saying. I'm sorry. I'm not a hotline. I'm not a hotline over here.
Exactly. No, but definitely having someone there to ask is absolutely invaluable. I started studying myself privately online, and eventually when I found out about Loagon, exactly that, like having someone, in the room with you that you can ask was absolutely invaluable. Just made me
Yeah.
move fast, so much faster.
Yeah, and I think Lowagon
Yeah,
also, even when it comes to Googling, I think Lowagon helped me to write down what were the right questions, how to Google properly what I'm looking
right.
for. Yeah,
Top
for
skill to
sure.
learn. Top skill to
Yeah,
learn 2020.
it's an underestimated skill. I'm telling you, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Samir, actually, speaking of starting to learn, can you talk a little bit about how has Lewagon benefited you in your journey to working with data, to going towards data science, and to where you are now at Kantar?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Wagon firstly introduced me to Dashmount, which is where I got my first job as what you might call junior data scientist in parentheses over there, And so I think that's one thing I thank them for definitely. They saw that I wanted to study data and they worked me towards it in terms of my career path.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody at the Lowagon team was very supportive, always putting me in touch with people who I wanted to network with in the data field, and even sending me articles and having me connect with the right people while I was in Dashmo was very valuable to my career success forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that Lowagon really taught me was to follow a simple process, which is how to actually come from a idea standpoint, how to pseudocode it in your head, what they call it, and actually transpose that into the screen.
Right.
What is this for? How can you make it more efficient? How can you refactor it? Are you repeating yourself, or can you actually just make the methodology more friendly? Is it readable to any user that might take your code later?
Mm-hmm.
Have you actually created a version control for this? All that methodology, just like with product development, which is what I studied in Lowagon, is invaluable even to the data science field
Mm-hmm.
over there. And of course, the most critical thing is how you're using that technology to apply it to a business idea or any
Mm-hmm.
vision that you have, and how you're actually using it to make the world a better place as well. How you're actually looking at the bigger picture. That's what Lowagon does, rather than just have you sit around and do a million while loops until you get it.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So
Awesome.
while we were actually looking in Lowagon at creating marketable products, we were also looking at the bigger picture of how it's going to benefit our stakeholders, how we're going to make it into a product that many people will use,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the sense of it really, like how can we work in a team to be able to make it something that we all enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it really gives purpose to technology, the coding camp.
Awesome. Wow. Awesome. Thank you, Samir. That's great to hear as well. And you have no idea. I mean, we're all super excited, and it's
Yeah,
great to see you in the job and on the path that you wanted to be.
that was great.
Um,
Yeah, thank
cool,
you guys.
Samir. Last question from my side. I will see if the audience shares any more questions, but um, obviously we can see China as a country has placed a lot of importance on things like AI and big data. It's part of the China Ministry of Industry and IT initiative. It's part of the Made in China 2025 plan. And China wants to be the leader in AI by 2030, super ambitious plans.
Yep.
So what do you see as the next developments for the data sector in China? What is coming in the coming years?
Um, I think that right now, China still has a long way to go in its AI path right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're going to actually see, at least in terms of business models where technology is being used, is that many of the things might actually not be applicable today, that they are that they will be as they will be as applicable today as they are in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example that I see is not sustainable in many ways is the food delivery platforms,
Mm-hmm.
or the delivery platforms in general. In 5 to 10 years, do you think that wages are going to be depressed enough so that you can get a person to deliver you Japanese food in 5 minutes anywhere in China?
Right.
These business models are inherently reliant upon a very non-artificial intelligence aspect, which is
Absolutely.
low-skilled labor.
Yeah.
So China actually has to become a lot more intelligent in seeing how they're going to be able to translate what is the human aspect of their technological solutions right now and making it into a fully technological solution in many ways. I mean, people are experimenting with drones, people are experimenting with driverless cars and things like that. Whether it's going to be a success, China is probably one of the top countries I would pick to be able to implement something like it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I wouldn't bet that the same model is going to be sustainable in the next 5 to 10 years for
Right.
e-commerce, for food delivery, for things like even factories, like
Mm-hmm.
assembly lines and things like that. So AI is going to definitely take more of a role in terms of how it's going to be able to replace tasks that humans don't want to do. Not necessarily that humans
Absolutely.
want to do and are going to be replaced by. Because that AI's fundamental job is to be able to make our lives richer. And
Yes.
at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds like I'm a broken record because everybody says it. At the end of the day, AI is going to change human beings' jobs.
Yep.
But whether it's going to enrich jobs or destroy jobs is the big debate. I would argue it's going to enrich jobs by actually making these human tasks that nobody wants to do
Exactly.
doable by technology.
Yeah.
And that's China's biggest challenge right now,
Yeah.
as is all over
Yeah.
the world, really. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think also when people start freaking out about AI replacing people's jobs and people being unemployed massively, I think really, and especially we see now already how a lot of machine learning and how data is being used to build AI is really
Yeah.
to replace jobs that are either really repetitive, so that many people don't want to do them, or jobs that are simply dangerous to humans. I
Yeah.
mean, either psychologically or even physically. So
Yeah.
I do hope it's heading that way. But indeed, China has been relying on, the quantity of things,
Yeah.
big labor force, a lot of cheap labor. But indeed, the next step is quality. So let's see how that goes.
But I think one of the advantages that all of the people, in this webinar must take into account is that you're really fortunate if you're working in China in data, because data collection is really not that much of a problem over here.
Yes, absolutely.
Chinese consumers are willing to give their data at any point. They're not the same as Western consumers in terms of, oh, this is my data, this is my privacy, and things like that. They are much more reliant. They're much more willing to actually share data with the customers as long as they can get something in return for it. And it's a very good data collection environment.
Yeah.
In terms of how you're going to get to your first goal of building your data foundation.
Yes.
Um, and so the problems that a lot of Western companies have, or data scientists in Western countries have, is how the hell am I going to even develop an algorithm if I don't even have the data for it, or
Yep.
can't get the data? It's illegal to get that data,
Yep.
Whereas the problem with the Chinese companies sometimes have is there's too much data, man. What are we going to do? Which is, I think you also, Pavel, have read the book by Kai-Fu Lee. It's China's biggest advantage is the amount of
For
data that
sure.
they can collect and how much they can actually build with that.
For sure, absolutely. No, I think that's indeed why, lately we have seen an absolute surge in terms of how much China has been achieving in AI and big data. So many research papers published, so many AI startups, is because really there's probably not a better country these days to work in data or to learn data science than in China, because data is just so ubiquitous here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of portals, information portals right now that are giving that information for a price. You can also download APIs now. You can do all sorts of stuff
yeah,
with in terms of data acquisition
yeah,
that is actually very efficient now.
for sure, for sure. All right,
Yeah.
Samir, thank you so much for joining. It has been super great talking to you. Lots of awesome
Oh, no
insights, and
problem.
we will for sure share some of the resources you mentioned in the chat later. And
Yeah.
also, same to everyone. Thank you so much for joining and participating and asking questions. You know, we do these webinars to grow the community. So what you think is very important for us. And I want to do a very quick poll. Just to ask you guys a few quick questions on how did you think about this webinar, and see what you think. So I'm just gonna launch this right now in your Zoom and give you guys a few seconds to reply. Really appreciate hearing what you guys thought. Samir, definitely feel free to reply as well.
Okay, sure.
And while you guys are replying, just want to remind everyone that the WeChat group that you joined to enter this webinar, it will be live, it will be ongoing. Both Samir and I are there. So if there's something that you didn't get a chance to ask now, or if there's something you want to ask us personally, do feel free to reach out, throw some interesting insights that you have found about data science or the data sector in general in China in the chat. I mean, we're all in these webinars to learn and to know more, to grow personally. And especially now when the situation in China is unfortunately a bit impeded with the virus, although hopefully climbing back to normal soon. Definitely just feel free to join us anytime, ask us questions, and keep learning there. All right, guys, I'm just going to give you a few more seconds for the answers here. Thank you so much for those who already answered the poll. I see a few more answers coming in, so we'll just wait a little bit more. All right, excellent. All right, so thank you all so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed this webinar as much as I did. Do get in touch with us because, as Samir mentioned, we are launching a data science program here in Shanghai for exactly those reasons, being being able to have so much access to different data and basically best tools and a lot of the best talent. We're launching this program on April 20th. Hopefully things with the virus are back to normal by then. And we would love to hear from you if you have any questions about this program or are interested in learning data science and joining us. So thank you all for joining. Have a great night. Stay safe and healthy. And join us on Thursday when we will be having a data visualization workshop where all of you guys will have a chance to try your own hands at coding, analyzing some very interesting data. We're going to be looking at startup investments from Crunchbase, and we're going to be doing our own visualizations. We're going to share the poster in the group chat, so you won't miss it. And we're looking forward to having you guys there. So have a good one and see you again soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you, Samir. Bye-bye.